happiness with New Method Wellness.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stating the Obvious with Dr. D at New Method Wellness. Today, our amazing guest is my dear, very young old friend, Miss the one and only Dona Speir. Okay, I'm just going to read your bio before we start. Okay. Dona Speir, I wrote this. You're going to be impressed. Dona Speir is a living testament to the transformative power of recovery, has dedicated her life to guiding others on her journey towards sobriety and personal growth. With an impressive, how long have you been sober?
36 years.
Jiminy Christmas, 36 years of clean and sober living. She has defied the odds of addiction and emerged as a renowned addiction recovery coach, interventionalist, author, and public speaker. Before finding recovery, Dona achieved fame in Hollywood at a young age through modeling and acting. Okay, we don't need to do that. It just goes on and on and on. But we get it, right? You're amazing.
I've had a lot of careers, Dr. D. I love it. I love
That's so funny.
you are amazing. Let me interview you.
Yeah,
You
do it.
are amazing.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Deanna.
Sometimes I speak at big things and I like talk about the beginning and then I talk about being a doctor now. And people are just like, but
Yeah.
it's good because, you know, you and I have always believed that if you do the right next thing, you can do and be anything you want to be.
Right. Right. But I didn't get to be a doctor. You did.
But you didn't want to be a doctor.
Oh, yeah. You're right. I didn't. I had no desire to be a doctor. I can't believe we're sitting here. So I was thinking back. I met you before I had my son. I had my son
Oh, yeah.
in 1994. So it's been 30 years I've known you.
I went to your bridal shower and I got in a fight with the people who threw it because they spelled your name with two N's. And I made them redo the invitations, but they didn't want to do it. It was like a big deal to me. And I don't think you even cared that much, but I don't remember. But I do remember your bridal shower and your baby shower.
I know you threw my baby shower for me. I was
Yeah.
so clueless as a mom. I had you were so maternal and I was so baby. How do you spell baby? I had a lot of growing up to do when I had that child. It's changed. A lot has changed. 36 years later, here I am sober. And you know, it's funny, almost doing the same thing, grown up a lot since then, grown up a lot.
What do you think that okay, so I talked about like you were a playmate and you were an actress and you were you're a speaker and do a lot of that stuff. What do you think you're like the most famous for?
Well, I don't consider myself famous. Isn't that funny? I really don't.
Yeah.
I would think what I am is well known for being a recovery advocate.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Tell me about that.
I think that when anyone anywhere reaches out the hand, I want people to know that I am available, whether it be in a larger arena or just one-on-one. And that goes for men and women. So if a man needs help, I can facilitate the necessary people to help that man, or when it's women. So I go out and I do speak, you know, in large arenas, but I also work one-on-one holding the woman's hand. So I would say I'm more of a recovery advocate because that's where my passion is, that's where my heart is, and that's where it's always been for me, you know, ever since I got sober. You know, I can't say my recovery's been a straight up hill. It's been like this, but I also got sober really young. I was only a month into my 23rd year of life when I got sober. And so I had to do everything out loud. I lived out loud in front of the eyes of everybody. And I made a mess out of things. But I thank goodness I recovered, you know, and I didn't have to drink and use behind a lot of my bad behavior. And I was the beneficiary of good sponsorship, and that helped. That
So
really,
much.
in the 12-step program, that saved me. And I never quit going to 12-step meetings my entire sobriety, ever, ever, ever. So I think that really helped too. I didn't always do things well, but I direction.
I personally, somebody said to me once, like, how long do you have to go to meetings? Or maybe I asked that and they said, until you want to.
Mhm.
And for me, I don't, it happened a long time ago that I looked forward to it. Somebody asked me today, they said, I don't go to church. What do you do for spirituality? And I said, well, I like see God and my higher power and spirituality in my meetings.
Mhm. I get that. I every day I seek out the evidence of God in my life, literally every single day. And I write about that. So
Mhm.
my spirituality has grown and flourished. I think in, it had to for me to continue to get well in my recovery. And so every day I really look for the evidence of God in my life. And it's funny, I shared this with someone on the phone. We were talking about the evidence in our life. And there's a line in one of our books that says that humility becomes something we seek for rather than a force feeding of hope high. And I'm
Mm.
doing this series right now of meditation of humility, and it's a 10 tape thing on humility,
Mm.
and to actually seek something like that versus getting it jammed down my throat.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, and I'll share this story with you, Deanna. Somewhere around 31 years during COVID, I got a force feeding a humble pie with that one, right? But now is seeking it and getting my feet back into those roots of God-centeredness and walking lightly and not making a big footprint around me is where I'm back to being, and that's what's really important to me again.
Wow. I have a friend in my home group, and she says, I'm just here to chop wood and carry water.
Exactly.
And I never really knew what that meant for a long time. And then somebody explained to me that in Buddhism, they say before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. And then after enlightenment, chop wood and carry water.
Right.
So that's what I'm here for. I'm here to chop wood and carry water. Now, all this amazing stuff that happens around me, like, yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's wonderful that I'm blessed the way I am with this life. But I'm here to chop wood and carry water.
It allows me to chop wood and carry water. That's what it has done for me. And that's what I'm so grateful for. I mean, I've got the today I don't have to work anymore, which allows me to chop more wood and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
water.
mm-hmm.
And that is just a phenomenon. So my days literally are around being of service to others. And it's no longer about me. I went up, I'll share this story with you. This is really funny. So, a lot about my story. And early on, I did these bad movies and I did modeling and, I did Playboy sober. And, I did that whole thing and it was really hard to fit in. And, because back in the 80s, being sober wasn't exactly
Mm-hmm.
popular.
Yeah,
you
I
know,
was sober in 1989. Yeah, I was 23, same thing.
right,
And I was the Coors Light girl in 1991, stone cold sober.
right.
And going to bars and signing posters and promoting Coors Light. And still, I just said that on this show.
Right. I did Tecate 3 years
I
of that.
remember. I
Right.
remember. Didn't
It
they
was
dye your
so
hair red one time?
at one time. Right, right, right. Actually, that was for Killian's Red because I
Yeah.
got Killian's Red too.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? I was just thinking about that the other day. Stone cold.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
remember when right at the end of my drinking, I'm going, God, if you could just give me a beer poster, just give me a beer poster, I will have found my niche. Then they could pay me to go drink in bars. And then right after I got sober, I started landing beer ads.
That's so funny. And you're like in the bar, not drinking.
And then I'd be signing autographs, and
Yeah.
by
Yeah. Yeah.
9 o'clock, they're coming up spitting on me. My name is Stephen. And I remember thinking, I need the Pope mobile just so they
Ah,
quit spitting on me.
I remember thinking like we would go to military bases and they were
Mhm.
so respectful. They're like, ma'am, do you mind if I get your, and just like, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And then we would go to these like fancy restaurants and hotels, and the businessmen were so in, like, I'm just going to take you out. I don't need a poster. And I was like, why are you so disrespectful and rude? I thought it was
Nice.
such a weird, like
Contrast.
dichotomy of the way I was being treated as a woman by
Mhm.
different, people.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Isn't that weird that we did that in sobriety? I know I've got pictures of me with Tecate Kents. They were always sealed.
Hmm.
And the funny thing was, working for them, they never once noticed I never drank.
Yeah, no.
Not one time, never noticed I never took a drink of Tecate.
Mm-mm.
3 years. Hi, hi, yuck.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, so I did all that sober, and it was honestly, excuse me, my nose is still running. Honestly, it was a great way, as I look back now, that I could go on the road, I could make money. I came back, I went to a lot of meetings, and I was of service to a
Hmm.
lot of women.
Hmm.
You know, but what I realized
And
back
then in
then,
your book too, sorry, in your book you talked about being of service to some of those women.
oh
I
yeah.
thought that was really cool. I loved your book. I already told you in person, I mean privately, that I was, I wanted to read it. I like to read people's books before they come on, and I couldn't put it down.
Oh, thanks.
And then knowing you was like, oh, that I remember that, and this is it was all true. It wasn't like
Of
exaggerated
course
or
it was
no,
true.
but lots of people write stuff that's not true.
Oh
And
yeah.
yours was like on point. Like, I remember that. I remember that. And she's like, I was just thinking about your book on the way here. And I was thinking, I remember when I met you and we were very young and you were telling me about Bill Cosby. And
Mhm.
I remember thinking, oh, that's not right. And you were like, I mean, it was a different day. Like, we
Mhm.
were like, that's a bad thing, but not like, hey, that was rape, and
Right.
non-consensual sex. And, we didn't know what that meant back then.
Right.
And I remember you telling me that. And I remember you and I like going, wow, that's kind of bad. Like, why would you do that? And why would somebody do that to a child? And blah, blah, blah. But when it came out in the news and people were like, do you think it's true? And I was like, I know it's true. I know
Yeah.
people who have been there. It is true.
Right. It's interesting about Bill Cosby. That took, so I had to do a lot of digging around sexual abuse for me. That took a lot of work to cut that denial because I was still protecting him.
Of course. Because you
Even
were,
in long-term sobriety, I still protected him. And it wasn't until I got really honest with the photographer and what happened to me in my early high school years and worked through that, that I put the whole story together of how I got away from him and then fell right into Bill Cosby. I mean, within a month, fell right into Bill Cosby. And see, in my little childhood mind, right, getting away from him, Bill Cosby was a hero to me, even though I was only 16. Bill Cosby didn't look like a predator because I had been with a really bad predator before him, really bad predator. So to me, I was moving out of a predator into something better. And my parents knew about it. And I didn't have to, though I kept the sex part a secret, I didn't have to keep my relationship with him a secret. And I got to move out of that. And it wasn't until I really got into some therapy, did some really deep inventory work. And this was years into sobriety because, I really believe denial keeps us safe until we're ready to open that up.
that's like your brain in psychology, we would say your brain, your brain protecting your psyche.
Right.
Like, and like I often say, I'm so grateful for drugs and alcohol. And people go, what? And I go, I probably would have killed myself with what I was holding.
Right.
But the drugs and alcohol like kept me alive, and then that didn't work anymore, and then these other things kept me alive, and the denial kept me alive until I was ready. My psyche knew I wasn't ready.
Right. Right. When the denial broke, the whole story came out. And then I was able to look at the whole picture and go, wow, that was wrong. That was wrong. Though I didn't go out, publicly with it, even when all that came, I didn't go out publicly with it because I had a son. He did not know about it. None of my family knew about it. And I wrote in my book, had my parents not passed, I probably never would have come out publicly with it. It would have destroyed my parents, because my parents were groomed along with me. My whole family was groomed.
And it was a different time.
Right.
It was
right.
a time when, like, I remember my parents let us, me and my two girlfriends, spend the night with our fifth grade teacher. That's not something you would do today, but nobody blinked. We went to help him, like, with a party and serve dishes and stuff, and he paid us $10, and we all spent the night. Well,
Right.
he wasn't a good man, but back then that wasn't like they were being neglectful. They just didn't know
Right.
that's not something you do.
He was America's dad.
Yes.
He had a little pudding ad. He had Coca-Cola thing. Was doing whatever I did with him on picture pages, Captain Kangaroo. He was a father of 5 children. He knew my neighbor. He was an African-American man who was 42 years old. He was 26 years my senior. What does he want with a young girl? Obviously, we know now, but what would he want with a child? So anyway, so working through all that, I believe that denial kept me from getting high, quite a few years of my sobriety, but
Absolutely.
It came out in other factions in my sobriety. It came out in a lot of defects of character. It came out in promiscuity. It came out in
protecting yourself.
Absolutely. It came out. And, once I had a kid and things moved on and I got divorced, I really had to look into some of that, because I knew once I was a single mom, I had to get well. I had to get well, and I had to take care of my son. Once I got divorced, my ex-husband and I went 2 separate ways. He didn't see my son, which was fine. That was his prerogative. I chose to have a child. I chose a man who chose not to be involved. My picker, of course, was broken. That's okay. That happens. But I made the decision to have a child. And with that decision, being a sober woman, I better make sure when I'm single by myself, raising a son, I better have good decisions. And I needed to get well. And that's when I stepped up and had to look at all that stuff. And it was hard. It was ugly. My son grew up together. And which was great for me. It was actually great for him. We have a dynamic relationship. And later on, I did tell him about Bill Cosby.
It said in the book that he really wanted you to tell the truth to help people.
Yeah. And
what a man. What a man. I mean, you did something right.
He's an amazing man. My son is an amazing, compassionate, loving, honest. Sometimes I look at him, I'm like, will you sponsor me? He blows me away. He does. He blows me. You know what? I realized with him, he doesn't have fear of people, of what they think of him. And he doesn't have fear of his feelings. As like I did when I was growing up. He can name a mom, I feel this way. Mom, this isn't okay with me. Mom, you know what? I live in an apartment. It's not okay. You come over. I would like you to call me first. And, he just sets his own little boundaries. And I'm like, cool. And that's what getting sober and doing all this did for me, is to make an example for him. And you know what? It's amazing. He has an amazing relationship. And I know he's going to get engaged, and he's got an incredible job. And he was the first generation of my family to go to college.
Wow.
Oh, I'm going to cry, because the people who walked before me taught me how to save my money and to take care of him and to raise a son and to make sure that I got to practice what was given to me so freely. And you know what? Even though in the beginning of my relationship, because I divorced the man I was with. He did get affected by my alcoholism, right? Because even though I wasn't drinking, he was a product of my alcoholism because I wasn't well. Things turned out that he is an amazing young man. You know, our books say, and I don't know who watches your podcast, but our books say, you know, when boy meets girl on a campus, even though I was 5 years sober, you couldn't tell me anything. I was well. I knew everything. And it says that if we aren't spiritually well enough, that our defects of character will come and bite us. And they did, and my pride and my ego. And I had so many defects, not even to name his, but mine. And I didn't have a God of my own understanding. So I had to fill that hole. And naturally, we got divorced. Mm-hmm. And he was a product of untreated alcoholism. Mm-hmm. And so somewhere God saw some mercy for me and him to help that, you know. And I've been so blessed, you know. So the healing began. So I know, look at me, I'm all cry. Mm-hmm. I've just been blessed, Deanna. They got good.
Yeah. You know, I think as moms, it's interesting. I want to read something to you, but as moms, we're constantly criticizing ourselves. We're like, I didn't do this well. I didn't do that, you know, as moms. And I remember when I was pregnant saying to my mom, I feel guilty about eating and how it's affecting the baby or whatever. And she said, oh, get used to that. That's just being a mom. You just feel guilty most of the time about not doing it good enough, because it's our most prized possession. And when you see somebody like your son, you go, wait, I did some things right. I mean, this is proof.
You know, I think it was last Christmas. I don't know what's going on. I said something that to him became a verbal dart for him. And I could see something, and I came back to him and I made an apology for him. And he looked at me and he goes, you know, Mom, I truly believe you did the absolute best you could with everything you have. He gave me a hug and he said, I love you so much. I'm just like, wow.
My biggest shame of my whole life was that I had a child with my first son's father, my first husband, who you know. Yes. I had a child with him that I let that be his dad when he wasn't a good dad, or you know what my son needed for a dad. He was, you know what I mean. Anyway,
a lot of guilt. I get it. A lot of guilt.
Yeah.
His father chose not to participate. I get that.
So when I finally told him, I said, I've always felt so guilty about, you know, I selfishly wanted a child, and I didn't stop and think, how is it going to affect you to have this person for your dad? And he said, Mom, that's silly. I wouldn't be here if you hadn't done that. And I was like, I thought this was such a big thing and that it must be so awful for you. And that's not how he saw it, you know?
We never looked at it from their point of view.
Right.
I know. Me too. I picked the wrong man to be a parent. I mean, gosh, my ex-husband even robbed me of co-parenting to be a good, you know, co-parent when we divorced. I get it. But boy, what great boys we have. Hey, for us. He stayed sober.
Yeah, no matter what.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what I was going to read you this.
Go ahead.
So I've never seen it before, but we were talking you know, there's a 12-step book about sponsorship. Well, I decided to read it because I do a lot of sponsoring, and let's see where the notes are. And I've always thought about, like, when you said you were 5 years sober and you meet a guy on AA campus and, you know, that kind of thing. Well, we all talk about how bad it is and how awful it is, but I've never seen it in the literature.
Oh, yeah.
So where is it? A second, I'll have to send it to you later, but it talks about like why it's not appropriate to be with somebody who is a newcomer when you've been sober for a while, because and why? And like it actually in black and white says you're taking advantage of this person because you have low self-esteem. I'll post it, Anna, in
You
the
know, Deanna, it's so funny because, I go out and I do a lot of talking for AA and stuff, and I always talk about the first time I got sober. Well, by the way, I didn't take advantage of my ex-husband. He had like 3-4 years.
yeah, no, I wasn't saying. I was just saying, like,
Fully sick.
yeah, right.
But it's funny. I share from the podium when I came in 1982 and I was 18 years sober or 18 years old, and I got 13th step by someone with 10 years sober.
Tell us what that is for listeners that
Okay,
don't
so
know what that means.
that's funny. So what happens is when someone with time gets together with someone who's brand new sober, and they have absolutely no business doing this. And I'm going to tell you why. Because first of all, I'm going to meetings, right? Up at rehab, he meets me in rehab, a Thursday night meeting at the rehab, and he's got actually almost years sober. Okay. And I'm not looking for a God. I'm not even looking to get sober, but I am really, really sick little girl.
Yeah.
Get a sponsor, right? And I don't call her, and I get a commitment, and I don't show up. Hang out in the half measures group, smoking cigarettes, right? Leaning against the wall, hanging out in my skimpy little outfits, looking for
Do you
attention.
remember the Sunday night meeting at the Alano Club in Newport Beach?
Fish out of water.
We used to call, not the fish out of water, the
Oh,
Sunday
the other
night.
one. Yeah.
We used to call that the last chance to get laid on the weekend. That's the end of the weekend. This is the last chance to get laid at the Sunday night Newport Beach Alano Club.
This speaker reading, I remember.
Yeah,
that.
the speaker reading. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Oh, how funny. How funny.
But it kept us coming back.
Yeah, those were some different times. Anyway, so a guy with time or a girl with time hooks up with a newcomer and takes them hostage.
Mm-hmm.
And what that looks like is they get into a relationship. Now, the person with time hooks on. The person who's new has absolutely nothing to offer a relationship, nothing. They've never worked. It's very easy to hook onto someone with time, right? Because I know I did. And this is what happened. I got in this relationship. I made the man absolutely crazy. I blew up his Porsche. I started his house on fire, and he got everything he deserved because he hooked up with a newcomer. And I share that.
That kind of makes you my hero.
Yeah. You know what? I share that at every meeting I speak at about my experience the first time I came around, because they have no business. If someone with time comes up to you and you're relatively new in the program, run, because they are sicker than you.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So,
but don't you think it's interesting that it's in the literature, that I've never seen it? And like, I will post it on, remind me, Anna, we'll post it on the, when we post the podcast, but it's actually in the literature in black and white, and it explains like how bad it is and why it's bad and the psychology of it. And I've never seen it in the literature. So I just found this last week.
I haven't read the new sponsorship literature. I've read the old one where it says on page 11 that men should work with men and women should work with women. That's how old the pamphlets are I have.
This isn't a pamphlet. This is the AA approved.
Oh, the grapevine.
The book. No, the book. It's a book called Sponsorship. I got it.
Look it up.
I'll send it to you.
It's okay. No, I'll get it. No big deal.
No, I mean, I'll send you like the copy. I mean, like which one it is.
Perfect.
But it's called.
That's wonderful.
It's called 12-Step Sponsorship. Where's the cover? 12 Steps How It Works by Hamilton B. And yeah, 13th stepping refers to making sexual advances towards someone inappropriate, such as a program newcomer. Unfortunately, this is on page, Unfortunately, there are members of both sexes who prey on newcomers and emotional vulnerability. Newcomer sponsees should be warned about this possibility. As a rule, the men or women who romantically interest your sponsees in the first months or year of recovery will no longer interest them in the second or third years. They will have changed too much as a result of their progress in this fellowship. But it goes on and on about like how sick they are. And I was just like, how did I not know this was in black and white after all these years?
You want to hear a funny story about 13 step? I got a call from a gal, actually like a DM on Facebook from a little gal who asked me to sponsor her. And I was like, I have a lot of girls I sponsor, and I'd never seen her. She said she'd seen me at meetings. And I said, well, you know what? I am really full right now, Bubba. And then I went, oh, you can't do that. So I called her back and I said, meet me at a meeting. So
Yeah.
she met me at a meeting, and anyway, I'm ashamed to even say that. So I met her at a meeting and I said, she said, yeah, you just stand up. So she stands up reluctantly. She'd been in and out for years. I said, okay, meet me at this next meeting. I want you to meet some of the girls. I haven't said I was sponsor yet, right? I'm thinking I'll pawn her off on one of my girls. Right? So she meets me at the next meeting. The third meeting she meets me at, and it's an open meeting for men and women, a fun kind of speaker meeting. And I said, you need to stand up again. So she stands up very reluctantly, right? She stands up, she sits down. So after the meeting, I'm folding up chairs, putting them away, I'm introducing her around, and I look over, and all of a sudden there's the guy, this one man who's like from another country, notorious for hitting on women. And I walk over to him. I said, get away from her. Like, no, we have business. She's in high tech, and so is he. I was living in Silicon Valley. And I said, you have no business with her. I said, get away from her. He's like, da, 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 da. He goes, no, I have business. And I looked at him, I said, look, you have zero business with her. I sponsor her. And she looks at me, she goes, oh, you'll sponsor me? You know what? 3.5 years later, I still sponsor them.
Doesn't your higher power have such a great sense of humor?
Sneaky
You're
show
like,
off.
oh, no. This isn't going to happen on my watch.
Exactly. Right in front of him. Oh, you sponsor me now. I just went, holy moly.
That is such a great story. You're like, oh, yeah, call me. Now we're doing it. Step one, let's go.
Isn't that funny?
That's a great story. And you're like over there protecting her. I feel
Right.
very protective of not just the women, but also any sort of newcomers in the program. I teach a lot of groups at where I work, and we do what we call the predator handshake. So like when a guy comes, you probably taught me that 1,000 years ago.
Also the hug.
Yeah, when they come up and say, oh, don't you hug? And like this concept of like, don't be a bitch. Like, I'm not a bitch. I don't want you touching me. Like those things don't go together.
Mm-hmm.
And so they all think it's hilarious when I teach it to them. But so many women I teach a group called Empowering Women. And so many of them don't know they're allowed to say, I don't want you feeling me up and groping me and hugging me. They don't even know that that's allowed.
And early when
I didn't know that. Did you know that?
Everybody was like, ooh, ooh, and grabby. And now I know I teach the girls, if they come right at you for that hug, you one hand on their chest and one around their shoulder. It's like you got them, you are in full control. It's one of the first things I teach newcomers, full control.
I always laugh. I go, oh, I'm not a hugger. And I put my hand out to shake. I'm not a hugger. And they're like, oh, well, and start to treat me like I'm the bad one. I go, no, I'm just not a hugger. You're not going to talk to me that way. So I have a funny story to tell you about a mutual friend of ours. He won't care if I say his name, Sean Martin. So he has this great story of all of us being at Gucci, standing next to you.
Saturday night, Gucci?
Yeah, Saturday night. And you saying, I'm not giving hugs tonight, but Sean is. And then Sean would be standing by us and he'd go, bring it in. Come on, let's hug. And he would like grope them the way they were trying to grope us. And you would go, no, I'm not giving hugs. Sean wants to give hugs. You want a hug? Here, Sean, he wants a hug. And he like feels them up and does all the stuff that they're trying to do. That's one of my all-time favorite stories. And he's kind of a badass. He's like from New York and nobody messes with him. So they would just like hug him and be assaulted and accosted and be like, ugh, well, this is not what I was hoping for.
That is hilarious, but that sounds about right.
Yeah. Isn't that the greatest guys like that are just like, no, you're not going to do this on my watch. I
That's
love those kind of men. They're my
me,
favorite.
me too. Me too. The real men in the program, the
Mhm.
real men.
We just had a guy in one of our meetings who was accidentally touching women on the bottom like more than 3 times. More
Yeah.
than 3 times. Like, that's an accident. So I was a little like intimidated to ask him to not come back to the meeting, but we did have a group conscious. And like, I'm always terrified to not ask anybody, to have somebody not come back. Like, it's just not my thing. I think everybody needs meetings, blah, blah, blah. So my husband, who's not in the program, came to our meeting and was like, hey, I need to talk to you outside. I don't think you should come back here. You should go to men's meetings. Do you have a list of men's meetings? And I was just like, that just made that so much easier for me.
Mhm.
How do you accidentally touch somebody's bottom more than once and more than one person? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking about the first tradition,
Which is,
breaking the first tradition about unity. Unity's got to come first, and he's breaking up the unity of that meeting.
yeah.
So he needed to be pulled out and told him he's breaking the first tradition,
Mhm.
and then given the men's meeting, saying, this is your first lesson in the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Wow, that's such a good way to put it.
Yeah, I'm a big tradition thumper.
Mhm.
I'd love to have information. I like my information to back your behavior.
Well, I
So,
was like, I want to ask him not to come back. And then somebody said, oh, you know, you need a group conscience for that. I was like, yeah, of course. So then I put out all the people that I know that are regulars at the meeting, and everyone was like, give him a list of men's meetings, you know. We got to keep these people safe. And especially a couple in particular that had really had a hard time with it.
yeah, yeah.
Tell me what your biggest failure was and what did you learn from that?
I've had a lot of failures. Oh my gosh.
Right?
I had a big one this last during COVID. I had a whopper. It's because my brainstorm was so big.
Mm.
So, I've always had a bucket list of things I want to do. I've always had a bucket list my whole life, and because of being sober, I've got to do so many things. I went to Egypt and I got
Wow.
to Pichu and I got to float in the Dead Sea, and
Oh my gosh.
it just goes on and on. I got to take a gal and who was new and she had no teeth, and I got to help replace all her teeth so she could get a job. And I just have this incredible bucket list of things I wanted to do and blah 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 blah. And on my bucket list was the book. So I want you to know the book was never meant to be published. I always wanted to write my autobiography. Everybody said, write your autobiography, and so I had always started it. And of course, being alcoholic, I never finished it. But I had started it, and someone introduced me to Chris Epting, who was the co-writer. He was the one who, like, I would write, he would tell me what to write, and then he'd take the end of chapter 1 and tie it into chapter 2.
Right.
And right, he was the one who knew how to structure it before we got it to the editor and all that. Anyway, so I talked to Chris, and what happened was it was right at the time of the Bill Cosby scandal breaking.
Wow.
When I was writing, and he goes, Donna, you know what? We can probably get it published. I'm like, my family doesn't know.
Mm.
Anyway, roll into it. So the book got published, but that was not on my list. So that's how that rolled about. That was just kind of something that happened. And I know you said failure, but I'm getting there.
No, what I hear you saying is that, it was meant to be and it didn't really have anything to do with you.
Right. It ended up me helping to be a sexual abuse advocate for women who don't have voices, is what that helped to be.
Mhm.
Anyway, so moving along in that, right when I launched my book, I went to New York, I launched my book, I did some signings, blah, blah, blah. I came back here, I did some signings, blah, blah, blah. I got on my first trip. I did a big talk. I did a boat cruise like down to Mexico, and I was speaking and doing the whole thing. I came back March 14th of 2019. March 15th, they locked everything down for COVID. I was booked from that March all the way out till January, all across the place, ending in Aruba to speak on my book. Okay. And God just said, zip it, Donna. You have nothing to say.
Wow.
But that was, you know what, it's funny. It was okay with me.
Yeah,
COVID,
yeah.
everybody was out of work. It wasn't a big deal. You know, you can't relaunch a book. And I did a couple online. It didn't really, you've spoke online. People are like on their phone,
Yeah.
top
They
sticks.
keep looking down.
Right,
Like, I see you looking at your phone.
right. And didn't go well. I'm not doing this. So I just wasn't supposed to do that. That was fine. So I get in touch. Someone puts me back in touch with someone I knew back in Newport Beach who's in New York, who's this online wheeler dealer promoter. By the way, I've gotten my coaching certificate and this certificate, blah, 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 whatever, right? It makes me basically a nothingness. And she says, let's put you on the internet. And it's COVID. And I'm thinking, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
My ego takes off and go, let's be an internet sensation.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of book sales online on the internet. I sold a lot of books online, but then we're wheeling and dealing and I'm shooting pictures and we're doing this online and I'm all of a sudden Miss Know-It-All and BS and bombshell. I'm doing podcasts and blah, 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 and all this money goes out, right? And all of a sudden, even though I'm still going to meetings, I still have a sponsor, I'm still sponsoring people, I still have a commitment. I'm losing God, Dee. I am losing myself. And what has happened, I am becoming ego-centered instead of God-directed. And I'm putting out money and I'm putting out money and I'm becoming this and that, and Dona Speir recovery and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's just, I crack up now. It was very humiliating, but I can laugh now. I can really laugh now because I wake up instead of doing my prayers, I'm looking online, I'm going, oh, him from Beaumont, Texas, he likes me.
Yeah.
Whatever. And I'm coaching a couple of people. I had written a curriculum and, I do know some things about recovery, I've been locked up quite a few times, And so finally, you know what? I was reading in the big book one day about how there comes a time, right, when we have long-term sobriety and we think we can drink again. And out come the slippers. And before you know it, we're drunk. And my heart went. And by the way, in the meantime, I had moved to Arizona and I still have my old sponsor, but I'm not grounded in here because, meetings are different and we're online and blah, blah. And I'm accountable, but I'm not really accountable. And I'm like going, I miss my roots. I miss my roots. So I put a halt, I talked to God, and I got a new sponsor. And I called a lady who I had known for years and years. She has 48 years and she's in Northern California. I actually called to ask her a question and she ended up being my sponsor. And this woman is Service International Circuit Speaker. I've known her since I lived in California. She was part of the Bellflower Big Book Group. She sponsors a ton of women and she kicked my ass. And I said, I need help getting rid of my Instagram, all this stuff. I kept my article writing for Recovery Today magazine because I did that for free as a service. And I got rid of all the BS. And I came back home. So one of my biggest failures, that probably was failure in one way, but what we say is our biggest liabilities turn out to be our greatest assets. you know, and I lost a lot of money to this gal in New York, but I also gained, it's been probably about 2 years now, I gained so much. I gained so much. I learned my vulnerabilities. My program has never been stronger in my life. I am more of service today than I have ever been, ever, ever, ever. And I don't, you know, I'm on the board of directors of a men's place here in Arizona. You know how I feel about nonprofits. You know, I started the Lynn House. That kind of went crazy. I stepped away from that after a year. You know, I did my year there and I left. And you know, but I'm big when people can't afford recovery. I want to be there to help. And I stepped on the board of a men's place with 83 beds here. It's the oldest step house here in Arizona. I wrote them up here because they were a nonprofit. I wrote them up in Recovery Today magazine and I fell in love with them. And where can you go for $150 a week and they feed you and you can live up to a year there? Where can you go? Where can you go? And it's promised to pay for the first few weeks. Where can you go for that? Nowhere, nowhere. God put me back into where I need to be giving what I've been so freely given. My time, my energy, my love, my heart, my soul. And so that failure,
Yeah.
And you know what, Tiana? I go and I'm still out speaking. I'm flying all over the place speaking. People are asking me to speak. And you know what? That's what I share my story. I'm like, hey, you know what? 30 years sober and I was a mess.
Yeah.
Looking at me going, you mean with 30 years sober, you can be a mess? I said, with 30 years sober, I am alive and active and we get tangled up. We get, because I'm only human. God only made me perfectly imperfect, man. Remember where we learned that? Think of where you heard that. Do you remember?
Betty Weeks.
Betty Weeks. And Renee Hasse used to say it.
Well, yeah, she got it from Betty Weeks.
Betty Weeks. And I used to hear from Renee Hasse all the time, bless her heart. God made me perfectly imperfect, man. And I took another detour, but it only brings me back to greater strength. So I'm so blessed beyond my belief. I'm blessed beyond belief.
That's so amazing. Have you heard about San Patriano, Italy?
No.
I'm going to send you the video, but it's a place, it's like a cottage industry. And so it's a farm where addicts can go for 5 years and they work on the farm. And when they leave, and it's a San Patriano, they make cheese and bread and all this stuff. And it's 5-star, like all the 5-star restaurants in Europe are sold out that you can't get it. You can't get their products. It's everywhere because it's always like the winner of all the food things. And when they leave there, they can work in any top-notch chef, restaurant in Europe because they've been at San Patriano. And it's like this recovery community. And my dream is someday when I retire, I'd like to go volunteer there for a whole year and just live there and be there. I mean, they're out like picking spinach and baling hay and doing all this stuff. They all eat, there's 1,500 people, residents. They all eat dinner together, all their meals in this giant hall every day. The thing that's a little different than the way we do it is they drink. I wouldn't do this part, but it seems to be working for them, is they drink a half a glass of wine with every meal. Yeah, that wouldn't work for me.
Know what? Everybody gets,
Right.
Everybody gets sober differently. I don't know what works for other people.
Me
I had
too.
to learn that when I went through coaching school. I don't have all the answers. I'm old school.
I'm old school too. But also, for me, alcohol's a drug, and I'm a drug addict.
Right.
And there's no doubt that alcohol is a drug. That's not even a question.
Right.
Like even I laugh when people say drugs and alcohol. I'm like, it's all drugs. Alcohol's a drug.
Nowadays people are smoking weed.
Yeah.
Look, there's so many ways to get sober now. There's so many different ways. I don't know what's best for anybody.
I know that when I go volunteer at San Patriano, I will not be drinking the half a glass of wine.
No, because if you did, you wouldn't be volunteering anymore.
No, I'd be an inpatient for 5 years. For sure. You know me and you know that's true. You've known me long enough. You know that that's true for me. But the point is like this place is incredible. And people are there saying, I could never get off drugs. I lived on the streets, da, 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 and I've been here for 5 years. And now I have a marketable skill in the community and I can work. And it's just like, I mean, I love the idea of a place everyone's working. It's not just people who can afford it. Everybody who is working in the community to make something to keep the house. We have a gardening program where I work. And I woke up at 3 in the morning and I was like, we need to build garden. We need to build like high, in the parking lot, we literally have these high rise, like garden beds that are boxes that are up to here. And I said, I want them to learn that you can start something, take care of it, grow it, harvest it, and then eat it. So they'll like make a little tomato plant and they'll come in and go, Deanna, this is my salsa. I grew this plant and I watered it every day and I went out and tended to it. And then now it gave me tomatoes and I made salsa. Do you want to try it? Like that little tiny thing changed how they feel about themselves.
That's a big deal. It's not tiny. That's a big deal from start. Remember when I said I don't finish things from start
Yes.
to finish? That's huge. That accomplishment. They'll always look back. I started it and look what I finished.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but how many times, I don't know about you, but have I sat on a bar stool and told you the business I'm going to start, the education I'm going to get, the house I'm going to build, the company I'm going to make, the blah, 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 and then been on that bar stool the next day without anything getting done. I'd say the biggest thing I have learned in recovery, one of the biggest things is like, just do the next thing and then you're a doctor.
You know what? I'm going to go make lunch and do the next thing and I'm a doctor. I mean, Dr. Seuss.
Donna, I met Dr. Seuss when I was an undergrad and I was still drinking. You know what he told me? I think you might have a drug problem. He came and spoke. He came and spoke at our children's literature class. And he told me, you might have a drug problem. Dr. Seuss. That's a real story. Is that the saddest thing you've ever heard?
Oh, dear.
Is that so sad? And I was like, oh, that's a weird thing to say.
From the man who draws psychedelic cats.
Right.
Cats who talk.
Tell me something about your recovery program that almost no one agrees with. Maybe not almost no one, maybe some people.
Wow. I don't know because I really don't care.
Great answer. What is a question that you wished I'd ask you and how would you have answered it?
I just kind of like the flow that we've gone. It's almost like we've been talking like old.
I know.
No one's going to watch us. They're going to go, why are we eavesdropping on their old conversation?
Could they just shut up? Like they're just going on, and then they were kids, and then this, and
I know. And Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, and they're double dating. Remember double dating?
No, I don't remember double
You
dating.
don't remember double dating with the bookie?
Oh, the bookie. Oh, I was so in love with the book.
You were so in love with it.
So in love. He broke my heart.
You are hilarious
Because the bookie and my husband, and I always blame my sister for choosing my husband. I said, if I would have chose the bookie, I never would have gotten in that mess.
Thank you. I introduced you to the bookie,
and
you said he didn't call me in 3 days. I'm breaking up with him. I was like, what? I think he's working.
I remember we went to that wonderful dinner party up in Los Feliz. patio. Do you remember that? I can tell you what I wore. Oh
Oh
my
my
God.
gosh.
And we listened to the Gypsy
I
Kings.
do remember that. Yeah. That was
Oh my
his
God.
favorite band.
Oh my gosh. Oh yes. Oh, I can't tell you his name, but man, was I crazy about him.
Can I say his name? His name was Ray, but we called him Rolo. He was
Oh,
from Cuba. Yeah, he was from Cuba.
he was Cuban. He
Yeah,
was,
he was beautiful. Yeah.
oh, I was crazy about him. You know why I was so crazy
So
about him?
charming. He's one of the most charming people I've ever met.
Well, you want to know why I was so crazy about him? Because he wasn't interested in me.
He was interested. He was just busy. You are such a crazy girl because I remember he called me and he's like, she broke up with me. I don't know why. I really liked her. And I could, and I
Wasn't
was,
interested in a relationship was one of the first things he told me. I went,
oh, we did. Well,
yeah.
he's probably telling me a different story.
I remember I took him to the Playboy Mansion
I
for a
remember
movie.
that.
Yeah. I didn't know what to do with him there. I'm like, what do I do with him here? I didn't even like, because I'm sober. I'm like,
Like you
and
probably didn't want to be there. They're
yeah,
probably
and yet, you
annoyed.
know what was so funny was because I'm actually an introvert. So we're running around the Playboy Mansion, right? And people are going, Dawn, it's so good to see you. And it was like right in the midst of my popularity. I mean, I'm on every TV show all over the place. But and people are going, Dawn, I saw you here. Dawn, it's so good to see you. And I'm like going, I told him before, I said, look, I'm not going to remember anybody's name. So just introduce yourself. And finally he goes, everybody knows you. And I'm like, they do?
I don't know
Just
them.
completely unaware of my own self,
Mm.
completely unaware of who I was, what I was doing, or anything. Just checked out. Just
Mm.
checked out. Like I had no choices in my life. I just kind of walked around in a fog.
Mm.
Love me, take care of me.
Yes, yes. Oh God,
That was me.
who's gonna come rescue me from my world and my life? And where is we went to an Al-Anon meeting recently, and one of the guys goes, "Oh, we forgot to tell you, park your white horses and leave your white horses parked out front." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's what I was looking for, a white horse."
Right. Right. I remember him saying that to me, and it was like just so unaware. I mean, there were producers and directors and movie stars, and all these people knew me. And I'm like, because I couldn't hear. I never paid attention. I was so selfish, self-centered, so self-seeking, so self-delusional.
Well, the other side of that is like, I agree with all that stuff. And the other side of it is somebody told me they picked their sponsor because she speaks in a frequency that they can hear.
Oh,
Those people were not speaking in a frequency that your true self could hear.
Donna, you're wrong. You're bad. Go
Yeah,
over
yeah,
that
yeah,
girl.
yeah. They weren't speaking in a frequency that your inner self could hear. And like then you went to AA and you met your sponsor and your friends and your sponsees, and they all spoke in a frequency you could hear. Like your real, authentic self was like, Donna, you're perfectly imperfect. You're beautiful. You're just perfect the way you are. And then your true, authentic self was like, oh, I can hear that. I can't, you've never, Donna, since I've known you, the world has been trying to make you a people, places, and things person, and it's never fit you. And that's what I got out of your book. What I got out of your book was the world wants me to be this or wanted me to be this, and it's never fit me.
Mm. That's Deanna. I'm glad you saw that. That is so true.
You told me a long time ago, I said, Donna, what's your like fantasy life? And I'm waiting for you to say, I'm going to be a big famous movie star and I'm going to live in the Hamptons and blah, 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 blah. And you looked right at me and you said, I'd love to have like one of those little flower carts and sell. And I was like, what? Do you know who you are? And you were like, no, I want a flower cart and I want to make flowers. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh, I don't remember telling you, but that was always what I wanted my whole life. My whole life.
Just a little
You
flower
know, I went to
stand, a little flower stand.
the flower stand. Yeah, out on a corner thing. Yeah. Do you remember the one on 17th Street?
Yes.
Yes, like that. You know, I went to
I hope
Florida.
you get that.
I can't do it anymore. It's funny. I went to Florida school
Mm.
I was a terrible florist. They called me the angry. They called me the angry florist. I kept pushing flowers in so hard they break. They call me the angry florist.
Oh my God, this has been so much fun. It's been so good to see you. Is it okay if I post that old picture of us when I post this?
Oh,
We have all our clothes on.
you we always you and I okay, anyway, yes.
Yeah. Next subject. Who do you think we should interview next?
Oh my gosh.
Well, this is what I do. Okay, so I just kind of like open, I ask everyone. And like when I interviewed Margaret Cho recently, and she said, "Oh, my best friend, he's a costume designer." And I was like, "Okay." And I called him, and he was like, "I'm not famous." I go, "I don't care. You're in recovery and you're a costume designer. Let's do it." Or he dresses people in the industry or something. And I was like, "I don't care if you're famous. If Margaret Cho said that, I'm going to do it, and we'll see what happens. And then I'll find out who you want me." And I'm just kind of doing like whoever people think would be a fun interview, whatever comes to your mind or your spirit, you know? And then I do that person. Danny Trejo has been promising to come on for like 6 months.
Oh,
And he always, and every
Danny
time,
Trejo. He's been promising to do the cover of our magazine for years. Danny
yeah,
Trejo.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna kill
forget
him.
it. Forget it.
I'm
You know
like,
what?
and you know what
When
he
he
does
dies,
when I
yeah,
call
when
him
he
and
dies
I
and take a picture of put him on my do you know you want to hear a funny story? Danny Trejo, I met him when I was 7 years sober. He worked very first movie he ever did was one of my films, and we were together in Las Vegas. He was 20 years sober, and we went to meetings together
oh my
in Las
gosh.
Vegas. He was a riot. He didn't have a speaking role.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? And we hooked up and not hooked up,
Yeah, I
the
know.
new, you know what I mean? We got together. I had my car there and we were going back and forth to meetings. He was 20 years sober.
When I was about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years sober, I went to a meeting in LA and he was the speaker. It was just like a random thing. And someone came up and said, "Oh, Danny wants to meet you. You look like his ex-wife," who I never met. I think her name was Lisa. I don't remember. But so I went over and met him and we talked and blah, blah, blah. You know, we just like he was super nice. But then we have a mutual friend who unfortunately passed away from cancer, but she told me, "Call Danny. He's a good friend of hers." So I texted him. I was like, "Hey, you want to come on the podcast?" And he texted me back a little hurt. And I was like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And then I was like, "How about this date?" And he was like, "Yeah, perfect." And then his what was it? His
Well,
assistant,
his people.
yeah, his people were like, "Oh yeah, Danny's gonna come." And his people would text me like once a week. "Oh, how about this day? How about this day?" And we were like, "Okay." And he just never shows up.
Sounds like recovery today. I want to do it. I want to do this with the editor. I can't wait. I can't wait. Crickets. Oh no, I'm back. Crickets.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what
yeah,
you should
yeah.
do? You should do what is his name? He did that video with the big fur coat.
Macklemore?
Yes.
Oh my God, I would love that. How do I get a hold of Macklemore?
I don't know, but
I'm
that's who
looking
you,
at my producer. No, if that just came to you, then we're gonna start working on that.
yeah, Macklemore. I think Macklemore would be a lot of fun.
Let's manifest that. Okay. Mhm.
You know who else? The other person I would suggest is I know we just had him on the cover of our magazine was I think his name's Robert Kennedy.
Oh
He's
yeah.
running for president. Yeah, he's got a lot of time.
Well, I am going to say thank you so much. It's been so much fun, and I feel a little selfish for just indulging in this so much. And like, I hope that our listeners got as much out of it as we did.
Probably not, but it's been great. Deanna, thank
It's
you.
a selfish program.
It is for us. Thank you, Deanna. It was
Thank
great.
you.
Stating the obvious with New Method Wellness.